My name is Abigail Walker, and I am 28 years old. Never in my wildest dreams did I think my sister Madison's Harvard graduation would become the day my parents publicly disowned me in front of 550 people. The ceremony was supposed to be a celebration, maybe even a chance to heal our fractured family. Instead, I discovered I had been systematically erased from the program, family photos, and even their will. The pain was unbearable, but what they didn't know was that I had finally uncovered the secret they had been hiding from me my entire life. If you're watching this video, I would love to know where you're tuning in from. Please hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how I stood up and changed my life forever. Growing up as Abigail Walker meant living in the constant shadow of my younger sister, Madison. From the moment she was born, it was clear that my parents, Gerald and Diana Walker, had a favorite child. While most parents try to hide their preferences, mine displayed their favoritism like a badge of honor. Madison was their golden child, their perfect daughter, while I was treated as an afterthought, a burden they reluctantly carried. My childhood bedroom walls were covered with academic certificates and honor roll recognition, but my parents barely acknowledged them. I still remember the day I won the state science competition in 8th grade. I rushed home with my trophy, excited to finally earn their approval. When I burst through the door, my mother simply glanced at me and said, "That's nice, Abby. Did you remember to pick up Madison's dance shoes like I asked?" My trophy ended up gathering dust on my bookshelf, while Madison's participation ribbons were prominently displayed in the living room. High school was no different. While Madison was driven to soccer practice in our father's luxury sedan, I took the bus to debate tournaments. When I was accepted to NYU with a partial scholarship, my father's response was, "Well, it's not Harvard, but I suppose it's better than community college." Meanwhile, Madison's acceptance to any advanced placement class was celebrated with dinner at expensive restaurants. To afford college, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings waiting tables, and weekends as a tutor. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but the alternative was dropping out. My parents had made it clear that their financial support was reserved for Madison's future. "She has real potential," my father once said within earshot, not realizing or perhaps not caring that I could hear him. During my sophomore year at NYU, I discovered something strange while helping my mother organize some files during a rare visit home. A document had fallen behind the drawer, and when I retrieved it, I noticed it was a life insurance policy that listed only Madison as a beneficiary. When I questioned my mother about it, she snatched it from my hands and said dismissively, "It's just an old policy. We have updated ones." But her reaction seemed disproportionate, almost panicked. My best friend Rachel Howard was the only person who truly understood what I was going through. We met during freshman orientation at NYU, and she quickly became the sister I wished I had. "Your parents are toxic, Abby," she would tell me. "You deserve so much better." Rachel's family welcomed me for holidays when returning to my own home became too painful, which happened more frequently as time passed. Despite the years of emotional neglect, a part of me still yearned for my parents' approval and love. So when the invitation to Madison's Harvard graduation arrived in my mailbox, it felt like an olive branch. Madison had personally called to insist I attend, which was unusual. We had never been close, but there was no active animosity between us. She was simply the favored child who accepted the preferential treatment as her birthright. "It would mean a lot to me if you came," Madison had said during our brief conversation. "The whole family will be there." The whole family implied I was considered part of it, which gave me hope. Perhaps time had softened my parents' inexplicable coldness toward me. Perhaps attending an important family function would be the first step toward healing the wounds that had shaped my entire life. I allowed myself to believe that things could change. With renewed optimism, I accepted the invitation. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a new chapter in our family story. How wrong I was to let hope overrule my better judgment. How naive to think that people who had shown me who they were for 28 years would suddenly become different. The moment I accepted Madison's invitation, I began planning. This graduation was my chance to show my family that I had succeeded despite their lack of support. I wanted to look perfect, confident, and successful. I spent nearly 2 months' worth of savings on a designer dress, a pale blue Vera, one that complemented my eyes and projected sophisticated elegance. It was extravagant, but I convinced myself it was an investment in my self-esteem. The cross-country flight from New York to Boston gave me too much time to think. 5 hours of replaying childhood memories, rehearsing conversations, and alternating between hope and anxiety. The woman seated next to me, an elderly lady named Dorothy, must have noticed my nervousness as I repeatedly folded and unfolded the graduation invitation. "Family event?" she asked kindly. "My sister's graduation from Harvard," I replied. "You must be very proud," she said with a warm smile. "I am," I answered, not mentioning that pride was just one of the complicated emotions swirling inside me. As the plane began its descent into Boston Logan International Airport, my mind drifted to the last family gathering I had attended 3 years ago. It was Thanksgiving, and I had brought my then-boyfriend James to meet my family. Throughout dinner, my parents barely acknowledged his presence, directing all questions and conversation toward Madison and her accomplishments. When James mentioned that I had just been promoted at my marketing job, my father changed the subject so quickly it was as if he hadn't spoken at all. Later that night, I found James sitting alone on the porch, looking confused and uncomfortable. "Is it always like this?" he had asked. I simply nodded, too embarrassed to elaborate. We broke up 2 weeks later. He never mentioned my family as the reason, but I knew they were part of it. Who would want to be with someone whose own parents couldn't seem to love her? After checking into my hotel near Harvard Square, I watched other families arriving, their excitement palpable. Parents wore university merchandise and took countless photos of their graduating children. Their pride was so evident it made my chest ache with longing. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "You've got this, Abby. Remember, you're amazing regardless of how they treat you. Call me anytime." Rachel's support meant everything, but it couldn't completely dissolve the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I had been seeing a therapist, Eleanor, for about a year, working through my family issues. Her parting advice before my trip had been clear. Manage your expectations, Abigail. People rarely change dramatically. Go for yourself, not for their approval. Sitting on the hotel bed, I rehearsed potential conversations with my parents. "Mom, Dad, it's good to see you." Too casual? "I've missed you both." Too vulnerable? "Congratulations on Madison's graduation." Safe, but impersonal. Nothing seemed right for the complexity of our relationship. How do you bridge a gap with people who never acknowledged there was one? While reorganizing my purse for the next day, I discovered a strange envelope I didn't remember packing. It was a plain manila envelope, unmarked except for a small coffee stain on one corner. I started to open it, but was interrupted by a call from Madison confirming the meeting time for tomorrow. The envelope slipped from my mind as I focused on getting enough rest for what would undoubtedly be an emotionally draining day. That night, I dreamed of my childhood home, wandering from room to room looking for family photos that included me, but finding only empty frames. I woke up unsettled, the dream too close to reality for comfort. As I prepared for the day, applying makeup with extra care and styling my hair into an elegant updo, I made a decision. Whatever happened today, I would maintain my dignity. I would not break down, would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. I had built a life without their support, and today I would show them the strong, successful woman I had become. With a final glance in the mirror and a deep breath, I left for Harvard Yard, the mysterious envelope tucked into my purse and temporarily forgotten in the rush of the morning. Little did I know it contained information that would change everything. Harvard Yard was a vision of academic prestige that morning, with crimson banners hanging from historic buildings and chairs arranged in perfect rows across the green lawn. Families streamed through the gates, everyone dressed in their finest, carrying flowers and gifts for their graduates. The atmosphere buzzed with pride and anticipation, a stark contrast to the cold knot forming in my stomach as I spotted my parents near the entrance. Gerald and Diana Walker stood tall and impeccably dressed, my father in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, my mother in a cream-colored designer ensemble that screamed old money elegance. They were speaking with another couple, laughing politely at something when they noticed my approach. Their smiles instantly faded. "Abigail," my mother said, her tone as chilly as a Boston winter. "No hug, no kiss on the cheek, not even a handshake. You're earlier than we expected." "Hello, Mom, Dad," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I wanted to make sure I had time to find my seat. My father barely glanced at me before checking his watch. "Madison should be with the other graduates by now. We need to find our reserved seating." Before I could respond, a tall, handsome man approached and slipped his arm around my mother's shoulders. She immediately brightened. "Abigail, this is Trevor Williams, Madison's fiancé," she said, her voice suddenly warm and proud. "Trevor, this is Madison's older sister." Not our daughter Abigail, but Madison's older sister, as if I existed only in relation to the favored child. Trevor extended his hand with a genuine smile, seemingly unaware of the family dynamics at play. "Great to finally meet you," he said. "Madison has mentioned you a few times." A few times. In what I later learned was a 3-year relationship. I shook his hand and managed a polite response, wondering what exactly Madison had told him about me, if anything substantive at all. As we made our way to the seating area, I was handed a graduation program by a student volunteer. Flipping through it, I found the family acknowledgement section where graduates thanked their loved ones. Madison's entry thanked my amazing parents, Gerald and Diana Walker, and my fiancé Trevor Williams for their endless support and love. No mention of a sister. I had been completely omitted, as if I didn't exist in her life. While scanning the program, I overheard my mother speaking to another parent a few feet away. "Yes, we're so blessed to have such a wonderful daughter," she was saying. "Our only child has always been exceptional. Our only child." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had been prepared for their usual coldness, but this public erasure was beyond anything I had anticipated. They weren't just ignoring me. They were actively denying my existence. When we reached the seating area, I noticed that the front rows were reserved for families of graduates with cards indicating names. My parents and Trevor headed directly to these seats, but when I tried to follow, my father turned to me with a dismissive gesture. "These are for immediate family only," he said quietly but firmly. "You'll need to find seating in the general section." I stood frozen as they settled into their reserved seats without a backward glance. Numbly, I found a spot several rows back, surrounded by strangers who had arrived too late to sit with their own families. From this distance, I watched my parents posing for photos with Trevor, their body language relaxed and happy. They looked like the perfect family, minus one inconvenient daughter. A photographer who was taking professional family photos approached me briefly. "Are you with the Walker family?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Abigail Walker, Madison's sister," I replied. He checked his list with a frown. "I'm sorry, but I was instructed to take photos of Gerald, Diana, and Trevor only." The client specifically requested family photos without additional people. Additional people. Not family. Not even a sister. Just an unwanted extra that would ruin their perfect family portrait. During a lull in the pre-ceremony activities, I noticed a display of framed photos near the refreshment area, celebrating graduates and their journeys. There was a collection from the Walker family showing Madison at various ages, all her milestone moments captured and proudly displayed. What struck me wasn't just the quality of the photographs, but what was missing from them. Family vacation photos that I knew had originally included me had been digitally altered or recropped to remove any trace of my presence. A Christmas photo from Madison's 15th birthday that once showed 4 people now displayed only 3, with an awkward gap where I had stood. They hadn't just relegated me to the general seating area today, they had methodically erased me from their family history. The realization made me feel physically ill. This wasn't just about favoritism anymore. There was something deeper, more deliberate in their rejection of me. As the ceremony was about to begin and the crowd settled into their seats, I noticed my mother distributing elegant gift bags to several people seated around them, undoubtedly containing expensive mementos to celebrate Madison's achievement. No bag made its way to me. It was as if I were invisible, a ghost haunting my own family's celebration. The cruel reality was becoming clearer with each passing moment. This wasn't a chance for reconciliation. This was something far worse. I had been invited not as a family member, but as a reluctant concession to Madison, perhaps to maintain appearances to her fiancé or friends who might have known she had a sister. But my parents were making it abundantly clear that while I might share their last name, I was not part of their family. The graduation ceremony began with a processional of faculty in their academic regalia, followed by the students in their black gowns and crimson hoods. The Harvard University Band played pomp and circumstance as 550 excited graduates filed into their seats, their futures bright with promise. In any other circumstance, it would have been a moving spectacle, but I could barely focus on the pageantry unfolding before me. The university president welcomed everyone with a speech about achievement, community, and the responsibility that came with a Harvard education. Under different circumstances, I might have appreciated his eloquence. Instead, I kept replaying the morning's events in my mind, each slight and dismissal cutting deeper upon reflection. When it came time to announce the graduates receiving special honors, Madison's name was called early. Madison Elizabeth Walker, summa cum laude, the dean announced. The audience applauded as my sister stood, a gold cord glinting around her neck. From my distant seat, I could see my parents beaming with pride, my father actually wiping away a tear. I had never seen him show such emotion, not even when I graduated from NYU, an event they had declined to attend due to a scheduling conflict. After the individual honors were announced, the ceremony moved to a section dedicated to family recognition. The dean invited parents of graduates to stand when their child's name was called, a tradition meant to acknowledge the support system behind each successful student. When Madison Walker was announced, my parents not only stood but my father raised his hand to get the dean's attention. To my horror, the dean nodded and handed my father the microphone. This was not part of the program. Gerald Walker, always the influential businessman who could bend situations to his will, had apparently arranged this special moment. "My wife Diana and I are so proud of our daughter Madison," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "Our only daughter has been a blessing since the day she was born." My heart pounded so loudly, I was sure people around me could hear it. Did he really just say that again with a microphone in front of hundreds of people? Madison has always been the perfect child, exceeding our expectations in every way, he continued. She represents everything the Walker family stands for: excellence, integrity, and success. Each word was like a knife, precise and intentional. This wasn't just ignoring me. This was a deliberate public statement. Then my mother took the microphone, her socialite smile perfectly in place. "We want to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge how proud we are of our true family. In fact, we've recently updated our will and family trust to reflect exactly who our family is." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even those who didn't know me or our situation could sense the strange undercurrent in her words. This was beyond inappropriate for a graduation ceremony, but my parents had always believed rules didn't apply to them when it came to making a point. From my seat, I could see Madison's face. Unlike my parents, she looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape. But she remained silent, complicit in her acceptance of their declaration. Trevor, beside my parents, wore an expression of confusion, clearly sensing something off about their statements, but not understanding the full context. The dean, looking slightly bewildered by this unexpected turn, gently reclaimed the microphone with a practiced smile. "Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Walker, for those personal words. Let's continue with our recognition of all our wonderful families." The ceremony continued, but I barely registered what was happening. 550 people had just witnessed my parents publicly disown me. The hushed whispers around me confirmed that others had picked up on the strange subtext of my parents' speech. A woman 2 seats away leaned toward her companion and whispered, "Did they just disinherit someone at a graduation ceremony?" The humiliation was overwhelming. I had come hoping for reconciliation, or at least civil treatment, and instead had been subjected to a calculated public rejection. Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. I would not give my parents the satisfaction of breaking me. As the ceremony droned on, a strange calm began to replace my initial shock. The pain was still there, but something else was emerging alongside it. Anger. Not the destructive, blind rage that leads to regrettable actions, but a clear, cold anger that sharpened my focus. And then I remembered the envelope in my purse. With hands that only slightly trembled, I reached for it, suddenly certain that whatever it contained was important. Something about my parents' excessive actions today felt defensive, as if they were not just rejecting me but actively guarding against something. As the university choir began a musical interlude, I quietly slipped out of my row, clutching the mysterious envelope. Whatever it contained, I needed to see it now. The elegant restroom in Harvard's historic Widener Library was empty when I entered, everyone still captivated by the graduation ceremony. I locked myself in the farthest stall, my hands trembling as I finally opened the mysterious envelope. Inside were several documents, neatly organized with paper clips. The first was a single page that made my world stop spinning. It was an adoption certificate with my name on it. Abigail Grace Walker, adopted by Gerald and Diana Walker on April 17, 1997. I was 5 years old when they adopted me, yet I had no memory of this. How is that possible? My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the official document, its government seal mocking the life I thought I had known. The next document was a birth certificate listing my biological mother as Sarah Mitchell. There was no father named. According to this, I had been born in a small town in Pennsylvania, not in Boston as I had always been told. Everything I thought I knew about my origins was a lie. Behind these were medical records showing that Diana Walker had suffered multiple miscarriages before they decided to adopt. Then, surprisingly, she had conceived naturally and given birth to Madison 2 years after my adoption. The miracle child they had given up hoping for. As I flipped through the papers with increasingly shaky hands, fragments of childhood memories began to resurface and reorganize themselves into a new, terrible picture. The way my mother would sometimes look at me with an expression I could never quite identify, now clearly recognizable as resentment. My father's inability to connect with me, his constant emotional distance. The family jokes about how I didn't inherit the Walker business sense or the Walker artistic talent. They weren't jokes. They were acknowledgments of a biological truth they had hidden from me my entire life. But there was more. The next set of documents were bank statements spanning decades, showing regular payments from Gerald Walker's personal account to a trust in the name of Sarah Mitchell. The payments had begun the same month as my adoption and continued until 5 years ago, when they abruptly stopped. Each payment was for $10,000, marked simply as SM Trust. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the next document, a handwritten letter addressed to me. Dear Abigail, it began in feminine handwriting. If you're reading this, I've finally found the courage to share the truth with you. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I am your biological mother. The letter explained that Sarah had been a junior executive at my father's company 28 years ago. They had had an affair while my mother was struggling with fertility issues. When Sarah became pregnant, Gerald had paid her to keep quiet, arranging for her to leave the company with a generous severance package on the condition that she never reveal the truth about our relationship. When you were born, Sarah wrote, I was young, scared, and alone. Gerald convinced me that giving you to him and Diana would provide you with opportunities one could never offer. In a moment of weakness and fear, I agreed. The adoption was arranged privately through connections, with the condition that I would never contact you. In return, Gerald established a trust for me and made regular payments that allowed me to rebuild my life. The letter continued, explaining that the payments had stopped because Sarah had finally refused to accept them, tired of the guilt they represented. She had been trying to find a way to contact me for years, but Gerald had used his influence to block her attempts. Recently, she had connected with Rachel, my best friend, through social media after seeing us in photos together. It was Rachel who had secretly placed these documents in my purse, knowing I would need the truth. Madison knows everything, Sarah's letter concluded. She discovered the truth when she was 16 and found the original adoption papers. Gerald and Diana swore her to secrecy, reinforcing that revealing this would destroy the family. I don't know what kind of relationship you have with your sister, but she has been complicit in this deception for years. I hope someday you can forgive me for my weakness. I have never stopped thinking about you and would welcome a chance to know the woman you've become if you're willing. Love, your mother, Sarah. Attached to the letter was a recent photo of a woman in her 50s with my same green eyes and the dimple in her left cheek that I had always considered my most distinctive feature. The resemblance was undeniable. The final document was a note from Rachel. Abby, I'm sorry for the secrecy, but Sarah found me 3 months ago. After hearing her story and seeing the evidence, I knew you deserved the truth. She's been trying to reach you for years. Your parents' lawyer has been intercepting her letters and calls. Whatever happens at the graduation, know that you have people who truly love you. Call me when you're ready. Love, Rachel. In that bathroom stall, surrounded by cold marble and the weight of decades of lies, everything suddenly made terrible sense. My parents hadn't merely favored Madison. They had resented me as living proof of my father's infidelity, a constant reminder of a mistake they had been forced to incorporate into their perfect lives. When Madison was born, their real daughter, they no longer had to pretend I was anything but an obligation. I wasn't just the less favored child. I was never truly their child at all in their eyes. The systematic erasure from family photos, the cold treatment, the public disowning, it was all part of a gradual process of removing the evidence of their darkest secret. By publicly declaring Madison their only daughter and updating their will, they were completing the process they had begun years ago, erasing me from their family narrative. And Madison, the sister I had never been close to but had never truly resented either, had known the truth since she was 16. She had watched their treatment of me for years with full knowledge of why it was happening and had said nothing. I gathered the documents with hands that had stopped trembling. The shock had been replaced by a strange, cold clarity. For the first time in my life, I understood exactly why my family was the way it was. The mystery that had shaped my entire existence had finally been solved. I checked my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was intact, my expression composed. Only my eyes betrayed the storm within, their green depths reflecting not pain but something new, determination. I had been invited to this graduation for appearance's sake, perhaps as a final farewell before being completely cut out. But now I had the truth, and with it, an unexpected power. I returned to the ceremony with the envelope securely in my hand, my mind racing with what to do next. The truth had set me free in one sense, but it had also handed me an impossible decision. Should I maintain dignity in silence, or should I respond to their public rejection with a public revelation of my own? As I slipped back into my seat, the ceremony was reaching its conclusion. Soon we would move to the reception, where families would celebrate together, where my parents would undoubtedly continue their charade of being a perfect family of 3. The decision of what to do next was mine alone. The reception following the graduation was held in one of Harvard's elegant courtyards, where white tents, flower arrangements, and champagne stations created an atmosphere of refined celebration. Families clustered together, taking photos and toasting their graduates' achievements. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over everything, a perfect backdrop for what should have been perfect memories. I stood at the edge of the gathering, watching my parents holding court near the center. Gerald, Diana, and Madison formed a tight triangle of intimacy, champagne flutes in hand as they chatted with the dean and several distinguished-looking guests. Trevor stood slightly apart, checking his phone occasionally, perhaps feeling the outsider he unknowingly was in this family built on secrets. With the envelope of truth clutched in my hand, I straightened my shoulders and walked deliberately toward them. Several people glanced my way, perhaps recognizing me as the woman who had been so publicly excluded earlier. I kept my head high, my pace steady. Diana saw me first, her practiced smile faltering slightly before she recovered. She whispered something to Gerald, whose head snapped up, his expression hardening as he tracked my approach. Madison turned last, her eyes widening with what looked like genuine alarm. "Abigail," my father said when I reached them, his voice pitched low to avoid drawing attention. "I think you've misunderstood the nature of today's invitation. This reception is for family and special guests only." "Family," I repeated, my voice steadier than I had expected. "That's exactly what I want to discuss, Dad. Or should I call you Gerald now?" His face paled slightly. "This is neither the time nor place for whatever scene you're planning to create. If you have concerns, we can arrange a private meeting." "A private meeting," I echoed. "Like the private speech you gave disowning me in front of hundreds of people? Or the private way you've been erasing me from family photos? Or perhaps the private way you updated your will and announced it during a graduation ceremony?" People nearby had begun to notice our tense exchange. The dean looked uncomfortable, glancing between us and clearly sensing conflict. "Security," Gerald said quietly to a staff member hovering nearby. "This woman is causing a disturbance." Before the young man could react, I spoke again, louder this time. "I'd like to speak with my family privately first. If they refuse, then I suppose we'll have to continue the public conversation they started during the ceremony." Diana stepped forward, her social mask firmly in place, but her eyes cold with warning. "Abigail, you're making a spectacle of yourself. You've always been prone to these emotional outbursts. This is exactly why we've had to distance ourselves." "Distance yourselves," I repeated, opening the envelope. "Is that what we're calling it now? Let me show you what I found today." I pulled out the adoption certificate, holding it where only they could see it. Did you think I would never discover the truth? That I would just accept being treated like an unwanted houseguest in my own family forever? The blood drained from Diana's face. Madison looked away, unable to meet my eyes. Gerald was the only one who maintained his composure, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Put that away," he hissed.
"Now. Why?"
I asked, my voice gaining strength. "Are you afraid of what people might think if they knew the truth? That I'm not your biological daughter, but the product of your affair with Sarah Mitchell? That you've been paying her hush money for decades? That Madison has known about this since she was 16 and said nothing while watching you treat me like I was nothing?" Trevor stepped closer, his expression confused. "Madison, what is she talking about?" Madison remained silent, her face a mask of conflicted emotions. The years of complicity in her parents' deception had trapped her in an impossible position, and now she seemed unable to choose a side. Gerald's attempt at control cracked. "You ungrateful little," he began, his voice rising. "We gave you everything. A home, an education, opportunities most children would kill for. And this is how you repay us? By dragging up ancient history to ruin your sister's graduation. Gave me everything?" I laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. "You gave Madison everything. You gave me the bare minimum required by law and emotional neglect that no child deserves. And now I understand why. I was never your daughter in your eyes. I was just evidence of a mistake you had to hide." By now, a small crowd had gathered at a slight distance, pretending not to listen but clearly captivated by the drama unfolding. Diana noticed and made a desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "Abigail has been struggling with some mental health issues," she announced to those nearby, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "We've tried to get her help, but she refuses treatment. This is exactly the kind of delusional episode her doctors warned us about." The casual cruelty of her lies stunned me momentarily. This woman who had raised me was willing to declare me mentally ill to protect her family's reputation. But I was no longer the insecure daughter desperate for their approval. I had evidence, and more importantly, I finally understood my worth wasn't determined by their acceptance. "Open the envelope," I said, handing it to Trevor, who stood closest to me. "See for yourself what kind of family you're marrying into." Trevor hesitated, looking at Madison, who had gone completely pale. Her silence was answer enough. He took the envelope and began examining its contents, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Madison," he questioned, his voice barely audible. "Did you know about this?" Before she could answer, Gerald lunged forward, attempting to grab the envelope from Trevor's hands. "This is private family business," he growled. "Family business," I repeated. "That's right. And like it or not, I am family. Biology doesn't change the fact that you adopted me, raised me, and are legally my parents. You can disown me, disinherit me, and try to erase me, but you can't change the fact that I exist." Diana's composure finally cracked completely. "You were a mistake," she hissed, her voice venomous despite her attempt to keep it down. "A living reminder of his betrayal that I had to look at every single day. Do you have any idea what that was like? Then we had Madison, our real daughter, and every time I looked at you both, I saw the difference between his mistake and our miracle." Her words confirmed everything I had suspected, but hearing them spoken aloud still cut deep. The nearby crowd's hushed gasps made it clear her statement had been overheard. Gerald grabbed Diana's arm, trying to silence her, but she was beyond caring now. 28 years of resentment poured out in a public setting she would normally have considered beneath her dignity. "We gave you our name, our home, paid for your education," she continued. "And you were never grateful, always wanting more, always looking at us with those accusing eyes, so like hers. Like Sarah's, I supplied. My biological mother. The woman you've kept me from knowing my entire life." Professor Franklin, who I later learned was Madison's academic advisor, had approached during Diana's outburst. An older woman with kind eyes and an air of authority, she placed herself beside me. "I think," she said firmly, "this conversation needs to move elsewhere. Immediately." Gerald seemed to suddenly remember where we were and who might be watching. His reputation in business circles was built in part on connections to Harvard, and this public scene threatened relationships he had carefully cultivated for decades. "This is a private family matter," he insisted, attempting to regain his dignified facade. "It became a public matter when you chose to make statements during the ceremony," Professor Franklin replied coolly. "And it appears to be causing considerable distress to multiple people here, including one of my students." She gestured toward Madison, who looked on the verge of tears. Trevor was still reading through the documents, his expression growing darker with each page. He finally looked up at Madison. "You knew about this? All this time?" Madison nodded almost imperceptibly, unable to speak. "And you watched them treat her this way? Your own sister?" The disgust in his voice was unmistakable. "She's not my sister," Madison finally whispered, then immediately looked like she wanted to take the words back. "There it is," I said quietly. The truth, finally spoken aloud. What happened next occurred with such speed it was difficult to process. Gerald, seeing his perfectly constructed life crumbling before his eyes, lost the control he prided himself on. He stepped toward me, his finger jabbing the air inches from my face. "You will leave now," he commanded, his voice shaking with rage. "You will take these lies and fabrications and get out of our lives permanently. I don't know who put these ideas in your head or forged these documents, but I will not stand here and let you destroy everything we've built." "Forged?" I echoed in disbelief. "You think I forged a government-issued adoption certificate? Birth records? The letter from Sarah you know exists because you've been intercepting them for years? Your own bank statements showing payments to her trust." Something in his expression shifted, a momentary flash of panic that confirmed everything. And in that moment, any remaining doubt I might have harbored vanished completely. "My God," Trevor said, stepping away from Madison. "It's all true, isn't it?" The crowd around us had grown, drawn by the escalating conflict. Gerald and Diana, socialites who had spent their lives managing public perception, were watching their carefully crafted image disintegrate in real time. "How dare you?" Gerald finally exploded, his voice echoing across the courtyard. "After everything we did for you, taking you in when nobody wanted you, giving you our name, and this is how you repay us? By humiliating your mother and ruining your sister's graduation? This is exactly why you were never truly part of this family. You're just like your mother, manipulative and ungrateful. His outburst confirmed everything to everyone within earshot. No denial, just anger at being exposed. Diana began crying, not from remorse, but from humiliation. Madison stood frozen, caught between family loyalty and the evident truth, while Trevor continued to put distance between himself and the family he had nearly joined. Professor Franklin placed a gentle hand on my arm. "I think you've said what needed to be said," she murmured. "Perhaps it's time to leave with your dignity intact." She was right. There was nothing more to be gained by continuing this painful public spectacle. I had not come seeking revenge, only acknowledgement and truth. Now both had been achieved, albeit in the most painful way possible. "I didn't come here to destroy your family," I said quietly to all three walkers. "I came hoping to finally be acknowledged as part of it. That was clearly never going to happen. So this is goodbye on my terms, not yours." I turned to leave, my head high despite the tears threatening to fall. As I walked away, I heard Trevor say, "I need some time to think, Madison," followed by Diana's anguished, "Now look what you've done," aimed either at me or Gerald. It wasn't clear which. What was clear was that their perfect family facade had cracked beyond repair. The secret they had kept buried for 28 years was now exposed to the light, and nothing would ever be the same for any of us. As I left Harvard Yard, a strange sense of lightness replaced the heaviness I had carried my entire life. The burden of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it had finally been lifted. The mystery of why I had never been enough had been solved. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like my own to travel. 1 year has passed since that fateful day at Harvard. The seasons have changed, wounds have begun to heal, and life has taken directions I never could have anticipated when I walked into that graduation ceremony clutching at desperate hopes for family reconciliation. The first person I contacted after leaving Harvard was Rachel. She was waiting for my call and immediately offered to fly to Boston, but I needed time alone to process everything. Instead, we talked for hours as I sat in my hotel room, the documents spread before me like puzzle pieces finally assembled into a coherent picture. "I'm so sorry I kept it from you," Rachel said, her voice thick with emotion. "When Sarah found me through Facebook, I didn't know what to do. The evidence was overwhelming, but I was afraid of how it would affect you." "You did the right thing," I assured her. "If you had told me before the graduation, I might not have gone, and I needed to see the truth for myself." 2 weeks after returning to New York, I contacted Sarah Mitchell. Our first meeting was at a quiet cafe in Manhattan, both of us so nervous we could barely speak at first. She had my eyes, my dimple, my habit of tucking hair behind my ear when thinking. The genetic connection was undeniable and strangely comforting. "I've imagined this moment for 23 years, she said, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. "I've rehearsed explanations and apologies, but now that you're here, they all seem inadequate." "Why did you agree to the adoption?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since discovering the truth. Sarah's story emerged slowly. She had been 24, ambitious and new to the corporate world when she met Gerald. The affair was brief, but intense. When she discovered she was pregnant, Gerald had already reconciled with Diana, who had suffered multiple miscarriages in their attempts to start a family. "He convinced me that giving you to them would provide you with opportunities one couldn't," Sarah explained. "I was alone, building a career, barely able to support myself. The financial arrangement gave me security, and I truly believed you would be loved as their daughter." "But you tried to contact me later," I said. Sarah nodded. "When you were about 10, I had established myself professionally and personally. I began to question my decision, especially after seeing a photo of you in a company newsletter. Gerald had kept his promise to provide financially, but when I expressed interest in connecting with you, he became threatening. His lawyers made it clear I would lose everything if I violated our agreement." Over the following months, Sarah and I built a relationship cautiously but steadily. She had never married or had other children, her career as an environmental lawyer becoming her primary focus. Learning about her life, her values, and seeing my own reflection in her mannerisms helped heal parts of me I hadn't even realized were broken. "I don't expect to replace the years of motherhood I missed," she told me during our third meeting, "but I hope we can build something meaningful moving forward." And we have. Our relationship today is unique, neither purely mother-daughter nor simply friendship, but something honest and nurturing that continues to evolve. Meanwhile, my relationship with the Walkers took unexpected turns. 2 months after the graduation, I received a letter from Madison, her first attempt at contact since that day. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "What happened to you is wrong, and my silence made me complicit. I've spent my life accepting the family narrative without questioning it, and I'm only now beginning to understand the damage that caused." We met once, awkwardly, at a restaurant halfway between New York and Boston. The conversation was difficult, years of unspoken truths hanging between us. "I found the adoption papers when I was 16, Madison confirmed. "I was looking for my birth certificate for a passport application and found yours instead. When I confronted them, they swore me to secrecy, saying it would destroy our family if it became public knowledge." "And you agreed," I said, not a question but a statement. "I was 16, raised to believe family loyalty was paramount," she said, not as an excuse, but as explanation. "By the time I was old enough to understand the real impact, the pattern was set. I told myself you were doing fine, had your own life. I convinced myself it wasn't my secret to tell." We parted that day with no promises of sisterhood suddenly rekindled. Some bridges, once burned, cannot be easily rebuilt. But there was a fragile understanding, a recognition that we had both been shaped by circumstances beyond our control. Trevor, surprisingly, reached out to me about 4 months after the graduation. He and Madison had ended their engagement, the revelation of family secrets proving too significant to overlook. "It wasn't just what they did to you," he explained during our brief coffee meeting. "It was witnessing how capable they were of maintaining such a significant deception. It made me question everything about the relationship and the family I thought I was joining." He shared that in the weeks following our confrontation, he had discovered more Walker family secrets, financial irregularities, and ethical compromises that had contributed to their wealth and status. The perfect family had been built on a foundation of carefully maintained illusions. As for Gerald and Diana, their public humiliation had consequences they had never anticipated. Several board members of Gerald's company, concerned about the publicity and ethical implications, called for a review of his leadership. Diana's standing in her social circles, built on perceptions of moral superiority and perfect family values, was irrevocably damaged. I received one letter from Gerald, not an apology, but a final attempt at control. He offered a financial settlement in exchange for my signature on a non-disclosure agreement, attempting to buy my silence, as he had once bought Sarah's. I returned the letter unopened. Diana has never contacted me directly, though I heard through Madison that she suffered what was described as a nervous breakdown in the months following the graduation. The carefully constructed reality she had maintained for decades had shattered, leaving her unable to rebuild her self-image. The most significant healing, however, has happened within myself. With Eleanor's guidance, I've worked through the trauma of discovering my entire childhood was built on deception. The abandonment issues, the constant sense of being unworthy of love, the pattern of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it, all of these could finally be addressed with full understanding of their origins. "You are never the problem, Abigail," Eleanor reminded me during one particularly difficult session. "You are a child placed in an impossible situation, with adults who projected their own issues onto you. The fact that you've emerged as compassionate and self-aware as you are is remarkable. Gradually, I've built what Eleanor calls my chosen family, people who love me for who I am, not what I represent or how I reflect on them." Rachel remains my steadfast friend, her honesty in finally sharing the truth strengthening rather than damaging our bond. Sarah has introduced me to relatives I never knew I had, cousins, and an aunt who welcomed me without reservation. I've also found unexpected strength in my career. The marketing firm where I work recognized my resilience and promoted me to creative director 6 months ago, a position that allows me to shape narratives in a positive, authentic way. The journey has not been easy. There are still days when the pain resurfaces, when I question whether I could have done something differently to earn the love that should have been freely given. But those moments grow less frequent and less intense with time. What I've learned through this experience is that family is not defined solely by blood or legal documents. Family is created through love, respect, and honesty. The people who stand by you when your world falls apart, who see your broken pieces and help you reassemble them into something stronger. These are your true family. I've also learned that the truth, however painful, is ultimately liberating. Living with uncertainty and sensing but not understanding rejection was far more damaging than facing the harsh reality. Knowledge gave me power and choices I never had before. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that our worth is not determined by those who reject us, but by how we choose to live with integrity even when it's difficult. Standing up for myself that day at Harvard was not about revenge, but about finally claiming my right to dignity and truth. If you're watching this and struggling with family rejection or secrets, know that you are not defined by other people's limitations or fears. Your worth is inherent, not earned through others' approval. Building a life on truth may be harder initially than maintaining comfortable illusions, but the freedom it brings is immeasurable. I would love to hear your stories of family revelations and healing in the comments below. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed how you viewed your childhood? How did you handle it? Please hit the like button if this story resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and resilience, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to self-discovery, and remember that sometimes the family we create matters more than the one we're born or adopted into.